Good day to you from Anagalactic at the end of the month, June 2026. This is the 4-year anniversary this month of AE, which you may see written behind me. Now, up here we have a diagram which I have been seeking for a long time on the internet. I had found it at one time, but it's actually rather difficult to find, and since I did not bookmark it, I had to find it again. This is a combination of two forces shown essentially as two curves. The significance of this diagram is, first of all, let's use our pointer here, and you'll see this red hatch mark where the force line crosses the space line being this horizontal abscissa, it used to be called, now we call it the x-axis, and what it means metrically is linear spatial separation between two protons. Like charged particles, which should repel, below the line is attractive force, and above the line is repulsive force. Now, on all curves of this nature, which diagram a relationship inside the atom, the final curve, that is the one that goes asymptotic here, you see, that is an asymptotic curve to an invisible straight line, that is always repulsive. And when I say for any force relationship inside the atom, there are two. This shows one of them, the proton-proton relationship, which occurs at the nuclear range, not the atom, which is much, much larger. The nucleus of an atom is fractionally smaller than the entire radius of any atom of whatever size, that is however many electron shells, which it can go up to 7 shells, for uranium has 7 shells, I believe. It's a theoretical unsolved mystery just how many shells there might be in an atom that has more than 116 protons at its core, but the natural limit of the number of protons is 92. Uranium is the last element in the periodic table of naturally occurring elements in the Earth. Plutonium, being the next one, 93, does not occur, and neither do any of the others. But after 92, which is uranium, there have been synthesized further clumps. The nucleus has been packed artificially with protons. It decays rather rapidly, and once you get over 100 protons in the nucleus, it decays on the order of much less than a second. That is, the half-life is extremely small, and so it's difficult to manufacture these artificial, that is, synthetic elements. But so far, the highest synthetically produced element has been number 116, but nobody is quite sure the theoretical limit, although it is known that the half-life would continue to go down even if it's below a millisecond, and that, of course, is beyond the reach of technology at this phase. But all of this is to say that the proton-proton relationship, in terms of force valence, whether they're repulsive or attractive at whatever range, at the innermost range, they're always repulsive. And this matches what Bošković discovered as well 2.5 centuries ago. Now, when it comes to the atomic system, we're talking about electron-proton relation, and that is, in fact, what Bošković diagrammed in his most famous, today, Bošković force curve, which looks very similar to this, in that it has humps below and above the space line. The nuclear force, which I'll just refer you to quickly here, which we have been covering extensively. Was I located here? Oops, that's actually Yang-Mills theories, that's something else. And here we are. So again, I'm just going to close this up a little because some information over here is a bit extraneous, but this is the diagram, and you see that that nuclear force curve exists right here, where we now have our pointer tracing that. But before, on the prior which I'll just quickly highlight one more time. You see that here at the extreme right it goes asymptotic, but here it does not go asymptotic at where my pointer is pointing. In the simpler diagram we just saw, it goes asymptotic this way, but it's here it crosses the space line a second time. Normally that would show the relationship of the electrons to the protons at the core. The Bošković force curve is a multiple curve. So this is correctly drawn, although there are several errors in this rather amateurishly drawn force curve. Essentially it shows the true scale relationship between the two forces controlling two protons at any proximity here. This hatch mark, which I'm indicating with a pointer, is at the 3 femtometer mark, as closely as can be measured. That is where the attractive force begins, as one proton might be approaching that would have to have velocity to reach here, because going to the right, if the proton is any further away than this hatch mark, then the protons are experiencing pure electrostatic, that is charge, repulsion. And this curve going up shows increasing repulsive force, and the maximum repulsive force is right about here. And then it attenuates to infinity, such that the two protons at any proximity to infinity feel each other. And that is called, by Albert Einstein in another context, spooky action at a distance, because it goes to infinity, but it would be felt instantaneously, which violates relativity. So this covers all the bases at the cutting edge of science. All the paradoxes are shown here. And in fact, I'll show you that also the collapse of the wave function is shown here. The collapse of the wave function occurs in this range, where actually the proton, although it's not a wave, so it's not the collapse of a wave, it is the collapse of one system into another system. That may sound baffling. That is the nature of my discovery, was to solve one paradox with another paradox. And I've discovered, I should have to say, a principle which I've never heard claimed, is that the means of solving a paradox is to find the anti-paradox, because all paradoxes are paired. I would say that's a major discovery, although I'm not sure I can prove that. I've just found it to be the case in several cases of a paradox, such as the collapse of the wave function, that you can solve it by finding the anti-paradox. So what this graph actually shows is the true force relationship further out than the strong force, where this is a smooth curve that transitions from the strong force to the electrostatic force. And this is accurate in that respect. And it's the only graph that I've ever seen that shows the true relationship between the two forces that control whether a proton will be attracted or repelled by another proton, which is rather basic. One more aspect to this, which may be baffling at first, but it's time to introduce this in order to prepare the way for the next video, which will be devoted to the Bošković force curve, which once again I'd like to show you is this curve, which again I want to extend. My tools do not self-adjust to what my mind is saying. I actually have to physically change it. So there we are. That is actually taken from Theoria Philosophiae Naturalis, which was published in one of its editions in Vienna in 1763, well over a century before any particle was known to science. And this is not the relationship, according to Bošković, between an electron and a proton, because he didn't know those terms. The electron and the proton had not been discovered. What he drew here was his interpretation, that is his formulation, of the force relationship between any two particles, and he just assumed that there was one. So this is the relationship between two fundamental particles, indeed at femtometer scale, although he didn't know that either. He knew that it was invisible, but how invisible, that is, how microscopic, he had no idea really. Well, I shouldn't say he had no idea, but he certainly didn't have the ability to formulate it in femtometers, which we do today due to technology. So this is a multiple curve, which you'll see has either 3 or 4 humps below the line and exactly 3 humps above the line. If this were showing a Bohr atom, it is a perfect diagram of a Bohr atom having 3 shells. So that is quite a remarkable statement. We'll be covering that in the next video, the total explication of the Bošković force curve, which unlocks the quantum of everything. I discovered the quantum of space, and I also have been able to interpret the quantum of action, now called the quantum of energy. And there are 2 quanta, and this has to do with a solution of the paradox, where the anti-paradox to the collapse of the wave function was never discovered. It's actually the quantum of gravity, all of which exist in the atomic system, and this ends up demonstrating the force balance relationship that applies to the universe at all scales and ends up solving the mystery of dark matter. I discovered that. I solved the mystery of dark matter. I know what it is and can show you. It's quite a remarkable insight. I hope you stay tuned. Thank you for tuning in. This is Anagalactic, approaching the end of June, the 4-year anniversary of this station, which thus far has produced 1,700 videos on essentially geometry, but now, because this geometry applies across the board, even into philosophy and religion, believe it or not, we will be covering a broad range of topics to show the applications of this brand new geometry that saves science from perdition and releases all the trapped, innocent children who are forced to study calculus. That will no longer be necessary. I've solved that as well. And the complex numbers will no longer be needed because I've discovered the integral number system that integrates calculus and complexity into a new dual system based on the Bošković force curve, as I'll be showing you, which actually is the Einstein field solution. It actually reinterprets space-time so that it's no longer an enigma, and it can be understood, and a high school student will be able to understand relativity, which no man can understand right now, with the possible exception of Einstein, who's dead. And nobody can understand space-time. It's impossible to understand because it's pseudo-hyperboloid geometry, which does not exist in the universe, but it is a derivative solution, which is very good for space travel, which no human wants, but some supernatural agency has already acquired. The United States government is obviously ruled by that supernatural agency, whatever that might be. Your religious background may dictate to you or suggest to you what that supernatural agency might be. It certainly isn't the good side of the force. So we'll be covering all that, the world political situation, economic situation, and military situation. We are currently in the apocalypse, which is difficult to date because no man, not even the sun in heaven, knows that day or hour, but the trend is obvious. We're heading for Armageddon, on which I'm the world's foremost expert, since I am the world's foremost expert on the Bible. And now I've read the Quran. I've had almost 2 years to read it. That was hidden from me due to the propagandistic statement of white supremacist Western science, which is atheistic and will kill itself, as well as the rest of us. But God is going to let that happen, so every being in the universe will know what it's like to go up against Yahweh Sabaoth, the Master of Worlds, as Muhammad said. We'll be covering the Quran and the ancient book of Enoch. Again, I am the only expert and the only one who can divulge these secrets. These are the secrets of the universe from Anagalactic. Thank you for tuning in. Keep looking up, and we'll be right back, certainly before the end of the month, which is in, let's see, 3 days. Thank you.